videos, a little bit about score report, and some parent resources. So why do we test kids? Basically, Florida educational also provide basis for student and school district accountability systems. We use assessment results to determine school and district grades, which give the citizens of the state of Florida and the country basically a standard way to determine the quality and progress of our educational system here in Florida. While assessment plays a key role in the Florida education system, it's also important to remember that testing is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. So in Florida, assessment and accountability efforts have had a significant and positive impact on student achievement over time. So the primary purpose of Florida's K-12 statewide assessment program is to measure students' achievement of Florida educational standards. Assessment supports instruction and student learning. Assessment results help Florida's educational leadership and stakeholders determine whether the goals of the educational system are being met. These assessments help Florida stakeholders also determine whether we have equipped our students with the knowledge and skills they need to be ready for college and career level coursework. So Florida's educational system also provides the basis for student, school, and district accountability systems. Assessment results are used to determine school and district grades, which gives citizens a standard way to determine the quality of our education system. And there are plenty of reports, especially you guys probably know when we do get our assessment results back, how it's posted in the paper, and you can compare schools, and it's very valuable as a resource. Okay, this image basically shows what is commonly known as the continuous improvement cycle. And this is like a great visual to explain what happens at every level of education. It's also known as plan, do, check, act. Whether it's teachers making lesson plans in the classroom based on curriculum, conducting daily lessons, providing checks for understanding through questions, homework, tests, or quizzes, state testing, whatever it is, schools, teachers, students should respond to the information provided and then adjust their teaching and learning to meet the needs of the students. Test results play an important part in this teaching and learning cycle. So our Florida's educational standards were developed with the goal of providing all students with an education based on high expectations. The statewide assessment program also provides feedback and accountability indicators to Florida educators, policymakers, students, and other citizens. All right, so who tests? All students grade 3 through 10 participate in a statewide English language arts assessment. All students in grades 3 through 8 participate in a statewide math assessment. All students in grade 5 and 8 take a statewide science test, and then all students enrolled in the following courses: algebra, geometry, civics, biology, and history participate in what's called an end of course exam. Although the content of this presentation is going to focus on the Florida Standards Assessment and the Next Generation Sunshine State Standards Assessments, it's important to know that students with severe cognitive disabilities also participate in statewide assessments through the Florida Standards Alternate Assessment. We also abbreviate that as FSA, Florida Standards Alternate Assessments. Students who participate in the FSA also take grade 3 through 10 ELA, grades 3 through 8 math, and EOC assessments when enrolled in the corresponding EOC courses, where the traditional FSA or NGSS assessments are delivered through computer or paper. The FSA is delivered via paper only. So the test design. If you are in grades 7 through adult, you will take all of your tests with the one exception of the grade 8 science on a computer. That grade 8 science is a paper test. And then if you're in grades 3 through 6, all of your assessments are paper-based. This is a standard delivery of the FSA and the NGSS content. However, for students with IEP or 504 plans, accommodated forms of the tests are available. When taking statewide assessments, all students of the same grade level respond to a common set of items on each test. The common items are called operational items, and these count towards student scores. Also included in mixer test are what are known as field test items. They're found on all student tests and in the same location on each student test. But these questions and answers do not count towards student scores. Field test items are administered to students only to gather data on the items. They could be used in future tests depending on how they perform. So anchor items are those items which have appeared on a given test in previous years and are used to ensure that the scores on the test can be equated or made comparable from year to year. So right here, you have what is called the cognitive complexity for statewide assessments. So statewide assessments are classified using what is known as the Web Depth of Knowledge model. And that is demonstrated in that graphic right there, table number 1. With this system, items are classified on cognitive demand inherent in the test item. So there are 3 categories. And this is in FSA, referred to as DOK1, DOK2, and DOK3 for FSA assessments. And then for the NGSS assessments like science, biology, U.S. history, civics, they are classified by low complexity, moderate complexity, and high complexity. Items at the low level of complexity require simple skills, such as locating details in text or solving one-step problems. At the moderate level, an item can ask a student to summarize a passage or retrieve information from a graph and use it to solve a problem. At the high end, or depth of knowledge level 3, an item may require a student to analyze cause and effect relationships or justify a solution to a problem. The distinctions made in item complexity are intended to provide balance across the tasks administered at each grade level. So you see on the tables, there's a range of percentage of points in each complexity level. And that's for each assessment. That's listed over there on the left. So as a parent, you can help your child by asking them higher order questions in everyday matters, asking them to explain, hey, why did you like that movie? Or compare and contrast 2 outfits at a store. Justify why they should have a later curfew. You don't have to agree, but if they practice making their case with you, it is something that will help them when they test. So if you look here, and I'm going to draw, hopefully this comes out. If you look on your screen, and you will see that a majority of the questions that are asked on these tests are moderately difficult questions. If students are used to responding to only lower level questions like simple, low compatible skill kind of question, they're never going to be successful on the test. A majority of the questions do involve moderate skill, and we're going to look a little more about that at that later. But it's important to be pushing your students and asking them these higher level types of questions. All right, so let's look at ELA first. So the English Language Arts test in grade 3 is only a reading test. That's the only component tested on grade 3. However, in grades 4 through 10, the FSA ELA test includes 2 components, which are combined to provide a whole test or a FSA ELA score. The first component is a text-based writing component, which students respond to one writing task by writing an essay. And the second part is a reading and language component. Students respond to reading passages and other texts. In grades 7 through 10, students also respond to audio and multimedia content. In this presentation, the term ELA, I'm going to refer to ELA when referring to the combined reading and writing assessments. When I just say ELA reading, I'm referring only to the reading test or other form items. And if I'm just saying writing, I'm only discussing that component of the test. So it's important to know in grades 4 through 10, guys, it is a combined score. Even though they take the writing in April, potentially, and the reading at a separate time in the year in May, they combine those scores. You'll never get a broken down writing score and an ELA score. All right, so writing. The writing component of the grades 4 through 10 consists of one text-based construction items. Read a variety of texts, and then they respond to a prompt. Again, no writing in grade 3. So once students read the provided text in the LA writing component, they respond to their prompt. There are 2 possible writing modes at each grade level. For grades 4 and 5, the prompt will ask for the writer's opinion or ask the writer to inform or explain something. In grades 6 through 10, the prompt will ask the writer to provide an argument or to inform or explain. No matter what the grade level or the writing mode, students will draw upon the text that is provided and provide evidence and information to support their claims or explanations. It's important to know about that writing that if students are heavily copying what is already written in the text, they will not get a score. They could fill up their entire page, everything that the whole space that is for them, but if they're copying too much from the text provided, then they could potentially not get a score because it's not their original work. Okay, in grades 4 through 6, students are going to take that ELA writing test on paper. They read their response, they read their text, and write their prompt in their test and answer book. And they have 3-line pages. Grades 7 through 10, their test is on the computer. They read their text and their prompt in a secure online environment, and then they provide a typed response in the text box. While the ELA writing component is one category that contributes to the overall ELA score, there are 3 domain scores awarded for each response. So the sum of these scores is the total for the writing reporting category. So they can get a total of 10 raw score points. The 3 domains that they look at for writing are students' purpose, focus, and organization, for which they can earn 4 points, evidence and elaboration, for which they can also earn 4 points, and then convention standard English, which they can earn 2 points. So here is an example of a grade 4 text-based writing description response. The student scored 8 points out of 10 possible. Now, I'm not going to read the entire rubric response thing, but if you look at it, you'll see that in the first section for purpose, focus, and organization, they talk about how the students responded fully in a sustained and consistent, focused manner, where they're thinking about who is reading this prompt. Whereas the evidence and elaboration and also the conventions of standard English, they didn't earn full points. So you can see that the scoring rubric said this response provides adequate support. You know, it's not full support. Or out of the conventions of standards English, the response demonstrates partial command of basic conventions. So it has some errors in inconsistent use of punctuation capitalization. So this is how a score rubric would look for writing. This is just a grade 4 text. FSA ELA reading is based on the standards found in reading, literature, and language strands of the ELA Florida standards. So this component employs a wide variety of written material to assess students' reading comprehension as defined in the Florida standards. The FSA ELA reading is composed of about 6 to 8 reading passages with about 6 to 11 items based on each passage. There are 2 types of reading passages, informational, and literary. In order to assess the student's mastery of grammar and standard English conventions, students are also asked to evaluate and correct grade level errors in what's called a draft essay. So here are the 2 types of passages. Informational passages provide readers with facts about a particular subject and may include magazine and newspaper articles, editorials, or biographies. The literary passages are written primarily for readers' enjoyment, may include short stories, poems, folk tales, and selections from novels. Most passages are selected from published sources, but some may be expressly written for the test. So as a parent, you can see that there is a wide variety of source materials used for this test. So it's important that your child become familiar with reading different types of materials. Okay, so for the ELA, this graphic here provides you how students progress throughout the years. So in the early grades, they're going to read more literary, actually it's split 50-50, literary and informational text. It's 50-50 in the elementary grades, where you can see in grades 6 through 8 and then 9 through 10, the shift goes more towards informational because that's what happens in real life. We read more informational text as you progress. Also on this table, you can see the word count, so approximately how long these passages are for each student by the grade level. The reporting categories are what grade level you're in. Grades 3 through 10 are the same. So on the next 2 slides, you'll see the definite reporting categories for ELA reading. You have key ideas, details, craft structure, and integration of knowledge and ideas. These expectations are based on grade 4 and 5 students. For all grade levels tested, the ELA assesses what students know and are able to do in these broad reporting categories, but the difficulty of the concepts assessed on the ELA progresses systematically from grade to grade, as does the complexity of the text presented to the student at each grade level. So the final 2 reporting categories are language and editing and text-based writing. And then you can see that it's pretty consistent, although it does, let's see where I'm here. See how you have a range from grade 3 through 10. It's the same reporting categories, no matter what, but the percent of these reporting categories on each test vary from year to year. All right. So we're going to check the chat room right now to see if there are any questions. And let's see, are there any questions? All right. Scanning through. Yes, it'll be as a reference. Okay, good. So Angela's answered all the questions now, so we can just move on. Okay, our next section is talking about math. And basically, the FSA math is based on the Math Florida standards and the Math Florida course descriptions. So it's a little different than language arts, where the subjects that you are seeing your child do homework day to day, these are the exact topics that are going to be on the math test year to year. FSA math is administered to students in grades 3 through 8. And there are 2 math FSA EOCs, Algebra 1 and Geometry. And these are administered to students enrolled in and completing that respective course or an equivalent course. For all grade levels and subjects tested, the FSA math assesses what students know and are able to do in the broad reporting categories listed on the next slides. Okay, so these reporting categories, it's not as clean as the ELA, but these are examples of the grades 3 through 5, so the elementary school. And you will note, let's see if I can draw here, although the reporting categories are similar in title, they basically spiral as you move through the years. Sometimes they combine the reporting categories. So, for example, you have operations, algebraic thinking, and numbers in base 10. But then as you move through the years, in grade 4, the operations, algebraic thinking is its own category. And then the numbers and operations in base 10 split up. So it's a build from year to year. And you can see that. I think that's probably self-explanatory as you see your children with their math homework each night. But this is how they break it up, and it's important to see that. Let's see. In middle school, grades 6 through 8, when you get to 8th grade, you can see, although it looks like there's a lot going on here, it's pretty similar.
There was a question about what percentage of the test is anchor,
when you get to grade
field,
8, the ratios and relationships
aren't
measured anymore, but functions are. Statistics and probability in the number system are combined into one category, which comprises a much smaller section of the test. So we're moving through the years, and then we're getting towards high school where we're starting to focus on different topics with different weight. Yes. That's a good question, and they don't share it with us. Most of the test is operational, which means the questions are going to be scored. But they do sprinkle the field test items throughout the test, and I'm just going to make up like question numbers here for the purpose of the answering the question. So, for example, let's say we were looking at a grade 3 test. Every kid in the state of Florida is going to have, and again, I'm making up these question numbers just for the purpose of this question. 1 through 6, for example. Every student will have the same question. They'll have the same question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, let's just say. Those are all operational items. They're the same question in the same order in the test. Every student in the state of Florida will have those counted. Now, maybe questions 7 and 8, they'll sprinkle in a field test item. So those questions might vary from student to student because they're testing that item to see how it performs. Those two questions.
Yes, there's another one about is there
so as far as the percent
that a student should
of
reach,
questions,
or is the,
they have not.
the regular
I don't
1
know.
to 100%?
It's not any documentation that I've seen. What is the percent of field tests? But a vast majority of the tests are operational. Now, again, the anchor questions are built in to measure consistency across the year, and those would be operational items also. So they're operational and anchor items at the same time. Hopefully that sort of answers your question. Sorry, I can't be more definitive. Any other questions popping up? Okay. Oh, that's an excellent question, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit later on in the presentation. So if they can hold tight, we'll get there. Sound good? And it'll be visual too, not just me talking. All right, so I'm going to move on and we'll get to the scoring and you'll be able to see what that looks like later. Okay, so high school credit courses. Although algebra and geo are high credit courses, it's possible that some middle school students with aptitude may take these courses in middle school and earn credit. And those are just straightforward. That's the percentage of points by reporting category each year. All right, science. The Florida science assessments are based on the benchmarks found in the Next Generation Sunshine State Standards and in the course descriptions. So the statewide science assessment is administered to students in grade 5 and grade 8, whereas the biology end of course test is administered to students enrolled in and completing the biology course. Usually that's in high school, although there are some middle schools that offer biology. So for grade 5 and 8, it's a multiple choice item test. In both grade 5 and 8, the test measures what students know and are able to do in these categories. Obviously, the level of difficulty increases from grade 5 to 8. So we got nature of science, life science, earth, space science, and physical science. And you can see the reporting categories. They're pretty similar, but obviously the difficulty level will increase between 5th grade and 8th grade. Biology EOC measures student achievement in science as outlined in the biology course description. It's administered to students enrolled in the course, usually taken in high school. It's multiple choice. It measures what the students know and are able to do in the reporting categories listed. Social studies and social studies assessments, we have civics and U.S. history. And these assessments are based on benchmarks found also in the Next Generation Sunshine State Standards and their course descriptions. The civics and history EOC assessments are administered to students enrolled in and completing their respective courses. And here are the reporting categories for each test. So this test also is basically a multiple choice test questions, and it's based on what they're learning in the class. All right, so let's look at some sample item types. We know that for ELA writing, students will respond to text by writing. They'll read several sourced materials and then write. Although both ELA and math tests contain multiple choice questions, any of the item types may be combined into a single item with multiple parts called a multi-interaction item. And we're going to look at some of the item types on the following slides. Okay, so the top box is your straight up multiple choice, and that's a math example there. It's important for students. They pick one answer, they bubble in the answer, and then they're good. You can see some non-examples. Students shouldn't circle things. If they're crossing items out, just process of elimination, they should never make marks through another bubble or cross out, like if they're crossing something out, like, let's see, if I can use my marker here. You don't want to cross something out where it's going through the bubble form, or if you're like a process of eliminating, tell the kids never to do that in the actual grid, because it could be marked as like the answer. We never wanted to do that. Another type of answering choice is the grid response found in that bottom right picture. And there are differences between the grade levels. We have grade 3, 4, 5, and 6. As you progress, then the grid responses become similar each time. But you can see that as you get to grade 6, you start having possibilities of negative signs, fraction bars, decimal points, whereas in grade 3, you just have your answer boxes and fraction bar and your number bubbles. It's pretty straightforward. All right. The multi-select item type, the student is directed to select a specific number of correct answers from among the options provided. This is on the ELA, both the ELA and the math test. The items from the different multiple choice items would prompt the student to select only one. No, that's not right. Okay, hold on, let me draw here. So if you will read the question, you can see where in the question it'd say select all the expressions that have the same value, right? So they're looking for multiple correct answers. In a language arts, it could tell you how many they're looking for. In this example, it says 2, or it could just be general and say all. And students would be expected to choose all of the correct answers, or in this case, 2 of the correct answers. Okay. ELA and math tests have what is called a table match question. So this item type presents options in columns and rows. So in the math, it could include numerical values, words, phrases, sentences, quotations. Math and ELA, both options are available. Students are directed to click a box that matches a correct option from a column with the correct option or from a row. Typically, there's only one correct option per row or column, although the number of correct answers may vary. So students really need to pay attention to what is being asked of them when they take these tests, because they will be specific. These items appear in the online and paper assessments. For paper assessments, this item might be modified a bit so it can be scanned electronically, but basically the student fills in a circle to indicate their correct selection. For the math table item, students could select numeric values in a given table. They may complete the entire table or portion of the table depending on what's being asked. For paper assessments, again, they may just like reformat that type of question or ensure it can be scanned or scored electronically. But this is a pretty accurate visual representation of the kind of questions that students would see. So there are also two-part questions in English language arts. They call these evidence-based selected response. And in this two-part item, the student is directed to select the correct answers from part A and then part B. So typically part A is like a multiple choice, whereas part B could be a multiple choice or a multiple select. So part A asks the student to make like an analysis or an inference, but part B requires the student to use text to support the answers in part A. These items appear in the online and paper-based assessments. So remember back when we showed you like the Webb's depth of knowledge and the level of difficulty percent on these tests, you can see where these multi-select or two-part increases the amount of difficulty that a student, that a question has, and it's basically it's worth more. But we'll get to that in a sec. Oop, sorry. All right, so editing tasks. So interestingly, both ELA and math have what are known as editing task choices. In the ELA, the students would collect a highlighted word or phrase, which reveals a drop-down menu, maybe if they're taking a computer-based test, containing options for correcting an error, as well as the highlighted word or phrase as it is shown in the sentence to indicate that no correction is needed. Students select the correct word or phrase from the drop-down menu in a computer-based test. For paper tests, as in the example shown on the left of your screen, the item is modified so that it can be scanned and scored electronically. So they kind of like broken it out. It's not a drop-down. The students fill in a bubble to indicate the correct word or phrase. For the editing task in math, the student can collect a highlighted word or phrase that may be incorrect, which reveals a text box. So I don't know if you can see on this screen. The directions in the text box ask students to replace the highlighted word with a phrase or with the correct word. For paper assessments, this item could be replaced with this type of question where they would just bubble it in. It wouldn't be a drop down, but you see how it is boxed in here. So the drop down would now look like this, where you have the 3 answer choices in front of you and you would just bubble in the correct answer. Again, this is a higher level of difficulty question. Okay, so timing. How long are these tests and when are they administered? The grades 4 through 10 writing test is administered in April, whereas the grades 4 through 6 paper test is administered district-wide on April 2nd. The grades 7 through 10 computer-based writing test is administered April 1st through the 12th. They need that larger window for computer-based tests because the district is not necessarily one-to-one, or each school isn't one-to-one, one computer per student. So they have to, they need more days to get the students through the computer labs. If students are in high school and they are the retake testers, which is indicated here on this bottom, that's a high school retake. We are currently in that window right now. The retakes are for students who have not met the grade 10 ELA graduation benchmark, and this test is administered twice a year, whereas the traditional grades 3 through 10 ELA is administered only in the spring. Again, we're in this window now for the retakers, and it runs through March 15th. The ELA reading test is a 2-day test, no matter what grade level you're in. The important thing to know is students cannot take both sessions in one day. So if you have vacation or plans or an illness, you can't say, oh, we're here on the last day and we're going to take both sessions in one day, even if your child is in a paper-based level year, grades 3 through 6. The grade 3 reading test is required for promotion to 4th grade. That reading test is administered in April, specifically on April 2nd and 3rd. So this way the Department of Education can get the scores back, hopefully by the end of May. Grades 4 through 10 reading is administered in May. As mentioned earlier, the ELA retakes for grades 11 through adult students, they're basically testing right now. So the math assessment in grades 3 through 8 also a 2-day test, but you'll notice here that in grades 6 through 8, it has 3 sessions. Don't be confused by the fact that there are 3 sessions, even though it's 2 days. Basically, students will take session 1 on day 1, and then they'll take session 2 and 3 on day 2. You can see that the session times are shorter. That's how they work it out. In algebra and geometry, you have a 2-day test following the format for FSA. All of the NGSS assessments, in this slide we have the grade 5 and 8 science. Those tests are administered paper, so we have specific days that they're administered. The grade 5 science is on May 9th and 10th. We're grade 8, that's a 1-day test, and it's on May 9th, district-wide here in Hillsborough. Biology, civics, and U.S. history, each of those tests are 1-day tests. They're all administered in May. So if I haven't given you a specific day for some of these tests, there's a reason why. There are windows within each school, and schools will determine the dates that they're going to administer some of these tests, especially computer-based tests. And they'll let you know via a parent letter, so you'll know exactly when your students are testing. Calculators. Calculators are a big deal. Calculators are allowed for the following tests and sessions. So in grades 7 and 8 for the FSA math, you can use a scientific calculator on day 2 or session 2 and 3 only. You cannot use it on day 1. For algebra and the geometry EOC, you can use an approved scientific calculator on day 2 only, not on day 1. And in the biology EOC, you can use a 4-session calculator only for this test. And it's a 1-day test, so you can use it the entire time. But no other grade level math are allowed calculators at any time. They're not permitted. It's important to know that use of an unapproved calculator or a calculator in an unapproved session could invalidate your child's test. So make sure that they understand this. We try to tell them at the school level, but it's important to reiterate this stuff at home. So electronic devices. Electronic devices are not allowed within arm's reach of a student during testing. This is a hard and fast rule. The reason is to ensure test security, basically. The DOE employs a strict no electronic devices policy during testing. A detailed list of prohibited devices is read to all students, and they're reminded that being found in violation of policy is cause for test invalidation. Then students are instructed to raise their hands if they have an electronic device with them. The test administrator will follow his or her school's procedure for collecting the devices. Sometimes schools just collect them and they put them in a bucket at the teacher's desk. Other schools will say, okay, guys, just turn your cell phones off, put them in your book bag, and we're going to move all the book bags to one side of the room. But the bottom line is they can't be on their person. Think about it. Cell phones can use double as a calculator, and if you use a calculator in an unapproved session, you can invalidate your test. Students can look up information on the web. They can spell check, especially if you're doing a language arts editing thing. The reasons go on and on why you cannot have a cell phone on your person. So please talk to your kids. It's literally the #1 cause for test invalidation here in Hillsborough. Kids don't want to give a cell phone. So we don't want to invalidate their test and not show their scores from all their hard work of the year. Okay, there are other reasons why a test could be invalidated. Certain violations may result in an invalidation in addition to the possession of an electronic device during testing. Obviously, if students are cheating or colluding, so to speak, if the incorrect amount of time is provided for a test session, if students are given an accommodation they're not allowed, or they're given an accommodation that is not listed on their IEP or 504. If students are not provided their accommodation and they have an IEP or 504 plan, that could be cause for an invalidation. If students are given unauthorized assistance during testing, if a student's test basically is invalidated, the student is done. They may not take the test again in the same administration window. So it's really important that everybody adheres to the rules and policies. We want to make sure that each student's result is a valid and reliable measure of their independent ability. So if there's any suspect that it's not, then a test could be invalidated. All right. So scores, when do we get them? How are they reported? So after students complete testing, the DOE has to go through a huge process to score and validate results before releasing them to the public. The high school English language arts retakes and algebra retakes administered in February and March, and the grade 3 reading that is administered in April, those tests are usually returned by May 31st. But all other ELA, math, and EOCs, those scores are initially released electronically to schools, and the due date for those scores to be returned or released is June 30th. It takes, after that time, approximately another month or a month and a half for schools to receive the individual score reports, what is known as the student home report. All of the student score reports are sent to the school at which the student tested. So if a student is testing this year in 5th grade, next year they're going to be in middle school, even though we might get those score reports sometime in August, potentially, the score report's going to be sent back to the elementary school. Same thing goes for middle and high. Middle and high school student score report would be sent to the middle school, not to their current high school of enrollment. Oops. All right, reported scores. There are 3 ways that scores are reported. We have scale scores, achievement levels, and rating category subscores. So students must meet in 10th grade, basically. In 10th grade, the students meet the ELA graduation benchmark by earning a level 3 or higher. That's the only time really that you're going to hear passing. It also applies for the algebra EOC. So a level 3 or higher is passing, or that shows that a student meets the graduation benchmark. In students in grade 3, those students have to earn a level 2 or higher in order to be promoted to 4th grade for the ELA reading. Remember in the earlier presentation when we talked about Webb's depth of knowledge and how they are easy, medium, and hard questions? So when we're looking at scale scores, achievement levels, because harder questions are weighted more heavily, raw scores do not give you a true picture of how a student performs. Two students could have the same raw score, but because one student got the harder questions correct, that students will have a higher scale score and potentially an achievement level. So the person who asked that question earlier, how are these scores reported? Is it out of like 100% correct? The answer is no. Although you will see how many questions a student does get correct, the weighting of each question will determine their final score, and then there'll be a scale. So let's look at what the score reports look like. So I took a screenshot of a sample ELA individual score report. What we're going to look at is what is a 4-page color report, and this will be over the next few slides. So basically your score report provides general information about the FSA program and the students' results, including their scale score, which we talked about, performance level, their previous performance, and reporting category scores. The report also indicates that the student's performance, how the student's performance compares to that of other students who took the same test in the school, the district, and the state. Finally, it provides a helpful list of resources, which we'll talk about in a few moments. The information on this report is presented in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. All right, so if you're looking at this, and I got rid of my little draw feature here, the front page gives you your student's main, oops, my little thing went away here. So we have our achievement level here in the big box, and this diagram over here on the left shows you where that student's I'm sorry, I kind of draw over there, the scale score and where on the range of scores your student performed. So in this example, the student had a 377 scale score, which is in the upper end of level 4. So not only does it tell you numerically, but it tells you pictorially how the student performs. All right. So on the ELA on page 2, this report shows a student's past performance to show their growth. This is a screen, basically this top part here. This is the growth section here. So you can see from year to year how a student is doing. It's available on the ELA score report and the FSA grades 3 through 8 math score report. On the high school credit courses or the science grade 5 and 8, they don't have that progression because those are specific tests for specific courses, and it's not in line with other things to show growth. This bottom section here shows how a student or how the school did, your district did, and the state did. So you can look at your student's score and then compare it to how people at the school district and state performed, which I think is kind of an interesting tool. All right. This page 3 shows your students' performance details. So this is where the reporting category feature comes in. Remember we talked about how many points are earned. This is the screen that discusses that for each subject area test. And then because this is an ELA score report, this final page will show you how your child did in writing. We gave a sample score reporting for writing earlier, and this would give you that physical breakdown of how your child did and how many points they earned for the different writing reporting categories. The writing domains, I should say. Okay. All right, so where could you potentially find additional information about all this stuff? There are 3 main sites that a parent can use as a resource. The fsassessments.org, right up here. They have a great student and families button. It looks like this. It's in the upper left of your screen on the fsassessments.org site. It talks about the calculator policies, can give you some additional details of what are allowable features of a calculator. I know some schools ask students to purchase scientific calculators for their class so they can use it throughout the year. So hopefully that they're sharing these calculator policies with you at the beginning of the year.
How do we access the recorded video?
Child's calculator that they've been using all year is something
so
that's allowed actually on the test.
Go to our
gives
district
you access to
website
practice tests
and just type in the search engine
for the practice
Parent
test.
Academy.
Score
It'll
reports,
take you straight to
descriptions,
with Parent
and
Academy,
you have the item descriptors by grade and subject. So even though we touched upon
other
some of these
webinars
things in this
that are coming
presentation,
up, as well
you can get
as
a very specific about whatever grade your child is in, what kind of items there
including
are.
this one. This one will probably be posted
presented to them
by
in the various tests
tomorrow,
and that's pretty helpful.
So if
CPOMs,
you want to
the center,
access it and
.org.
Mercedes
this is
basically
you know that
the
official location for standards and course information. It's a
PowerPoint
heavily used by teachers.
However, we did not
to
set it
make sure
up
they're
for
on track.
this particular
but the good thing for
presentation,
parents
so
to
you will
know
not
is
be
that
able
there
to
are
access,
hundreds of free student tutorials on CPOMs. So you can see what the
you will
expectations
not
are
be able
for
to
each student per
access
grade
the,
level, and then there are the tutorials, which is
you will
great.
not be able to access
And then
the,
finally, our
the,
resource here is the Pearson Access Next.com.
Go back to
So for the biology,
at
civics,
the,
and U.S. history,
or
you
listen
can
to the
see
webinar
the practice
again, or share it
tests
with
that are
your
available,
friends.
and
It,
answer
it'll be
keys. They give you the
available
answers
on our
right there.
website. It'll be archived.
The Florida Access Next
to
Resource
probably about
Center
another 2
for
years. So,
score and
I
reporting
apologize for that. I
information.
thought
Our
we
score
had that
report that we
set
showed
up.
in this
So,
presentation focused predominantly on
but we'll
FSA,
make it available. What
but
we'll
there
do
are
is we'll
score
try to make it
reports that you can
available
see and explanations
and
for
then have you
those
able to print
assessments
it out
also.
later. That's what we'll do. Because we didn't set it up for download
So
on this particular one.
all the information that's provided in this PowerPoint, I basically got from the DOE, from the statewide assessment program information guide.
Our district website is, if you just type
it's
in
about a
any
50-60 page document,
Safari or
which
whatever,
goes into greater detail of all the topics
you can just
that we discussed
type
here.
in Hillsborough County Public Schools.
I also use the FSA
right
portal for some of the information. That's the one with the students and
else?
families button.
Any other questions?
All right.
Oh, Mercedes put the URL
So
there. There it is, www.
At the end of our presentation now, do you have any questions? I see Angela's responding to some.
Any other questions?
Oh, good.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for attending tonight's webinar. Deidre, you did a phenomenal job with so much wealth of information. We thank you so much, and we hope that this information is going to be helpful to your students, to your babies. And remember, asking those higher order thinking questions, just anything that helps them think, get their brains moving, is going to be useful. Ask them, try not to do the yes or no type answers, but things that's going to make them have to think. And don't be so much concerned about whether the answer is right or wrong. Like, you can ask something like, why do you think a giraffe's neck is long? That's higher order. We don't know. There's no specific answer for that question. but it gets them thinking and gets that
Right.
mind growing and and helping that brain connect and get those dendrites growing. So anyway, thank you all so much for attending and hope you all have a good night.
Yeah.